It is the ulna of left side. It presents head, neck and radial tuberosity. It is the upper end and it is the lower end, and this is shaft. Shaft presents 3 border and 3 surface. This is medial or interosseous border, anterior border and posterior border. Between the medial or interosseous border and anterior border, this is anterior surface. Medial or interosseous border and between the posterior border, this is posterior surface, and between the posterior border and anterior border, this is lateral surface. Now head is like disc shape and it articulates with the capitulum of the humerus, and this is elbow joint. It is hinge joint. Neck is attached to the quadrate ligament, radial tuberosity. Posterior surface of the radial tuberosity is rough and receives insertion of tendon of biceps brachii. This is anterior surface. Anterior surface, upper 2/3 of anterior surface receives origin of flexor pollicis longus, and lower 1/4 of anterior surface receives insertion of pronator quadratus. This is lateral surface. Lateral surface, anterior oblique cord. This is anterior border. Anterior oblique cord. Upper anterior oblique part receives insertion of flexor digitorum superficialis. This is anterior part and this is oblique part. Upper oblique part receives insertion of flexor digitorum superficialis, and lower vertical ridge provides attachment to the lateral tendon of extensor retinaculum. Now this is the posterior surface. Posterior surface receives origin of abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. Upper abductor pollicis longus and lower extensor pollicis brevis. This is the lateral surface. Middle of the lateral surface receives insertion of pronator teres, and upper part of the lateral surface receives insertion of superficial and deep part of supinator muscle with the deep branch of radial nerve or posterior interosseous nerve. In the lower part of the lateral surface receives insertion of brachioradialis. Rest of the lower surface is covered by the extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis. Now, brachioradialis is crossed by the oblique cord of abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. This is the dorsal tubercle of Lister. Posterior border of the shaft, in the lower part, dorsal tubercle of Lister is present. Lateral to medial posterior surface relation. Extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor pollicis longus, extensor digitorum, extensor indicis. In the lower part of radial tuberosity, it presents oblique cord and interosseous membrane of radius and interosseous membrane of ulna. It presents a gap. Between the oblique cord and interosseous membrane presents a gap, and posterior interosseous vessels passes along this gap. These gaps also provides anterior interosseous vessels. Between the interosseous membrane and between this a gap provides anterior interosseous vessels. Okay, this is the inferior carpal articular surface. Scaphoid lateral bridge articulates with the scaphoid, and medial bridge articulates with the lunate. Okay, medial surface of the head articulates with the radial notch of ulna like this, and this is superior radial joint. Head of the ulna articulates with the radius like this, and this is inferior radioulnar joint. Superior radioulnar joint and inferior radioulnar joint is a pivot type of synovial joint. Between superior radioulnar joint and inferior radioulnar joint, middle radioulnar joint, and middle radioulnar joint is syndesmosis type of fibrous joint. Okay, this is radius of right side, and it also presents head, neck and radial tuberosity, interosseous border, anterior border and posterior border, anterior surface, lateral surface and posterior surface. Posterior of the radial tuberosity receives insertion of the tendon of biceps brachii. Anterior surface receives origin flexor pollicis longus upper 2/3 and lower 1/4 pronator quadratus insertion. Lateral surface upper oblique cord of the anterior border receives origin of flexor digitorum superficialis, and lateral oblique bridge of anterior border provides attachment to the extensor retinaculum. Now lateral border, middle of the lateral border receives insertion of pronator teres, and upper part of the lateral border receives insertion of supinator. Lower of the lateral border receives insertion of brachioradialis and is crossed by the abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis. This is the posterior surface, and abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis origin, and this is dorsal tubercle of Lister, and this is radius.